today here. So
And we are live. Great. So, hello everyone. Faiza Yusuf here. And as promised, today is the first episode of our webinar series on communication skills. We have Nadia with us. She's going to introduce herself and talk about the topic. But I just wanted to tell you a bit about why we plan to do this. We have been seeing that a lot of members in our community and students from our boot camp have been asking about how to deal with people at the workplace and how to ensure that you are able to work with a diverse team and you perform your best while you're working with them. So we wanted to have an expert on board who can talk about these topics and help prepare these early professionals and fresh graduates in terms of getting the right communication skills while dealing with their teams. So Nadia is here. I'll be on the backstage, and Nadia is going to talk about herself as well as the topic. So over to you, Nadia.
thank you so much, Faiza, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share my knowledge and expertise and experience, actually. And I'm really excited to share all of this with this specific audience that you talked about. And I know that, we have like tech giants and we have people who have lots of experience, but I think it's important to share this knowledge with people who are just kind of entering the field, maybe are in the field, and then want to just know more about it. And as you were giving the introduction, it was really interesting that you were mentioning, or you mentioned all the questions that people had, because when I was planning this session, I just thought, it would be nice to maybe ask questions and then have answers to those questions that people may have generally that you want to talk about. So just gonna move to. So just a little bit about me. I am a teacher trainer. I teach. I'm a teacher actually by profession. I love teaching. I love my students. I have taught students from all the six continents that people live, and over 100 countries. So my students have belonged to over 100 countries. At times, I'd have to go and look at the map and see, I kind of have a rough idea which continent the country was, and then I'd have to go and see, where within that continent that country uh, geographically was located. And so that was really interesting. Then I am also a teacher trainer. I train and I teach teachers who want to be TESOL teachers, like teaching English as a second language. My background is in linguistics. Then from there it was ESL, ELL, and then curriculum development, content writing, online instruction. Nowadays, not nowadays. I've been doing online instruction for the past 2 to 3 years now. So lots of instructional designing activities as well that I do. I'm also a communication skills instructor and a diversity and inclusion training facilitator. I have done lots and lots of sessions at my workplace, at conferences around diversity and inclusion. A big project that I was part of till last year was indigenizing the ELL curriculum. So that meant decolonizing the curriculum, and so that meant that we needed to kind of partner with Indigenous communities in Canada, and then come up with solutions and how to create this inclusive environment so that a lot of immigrants coming to Canada would not have the lens that they normally do have towards Indigenous communities, and to dispel some of the myths about Indigenous communities as well. I've done my intercultural competencies for leaders certification from Bow Valley College. That's where I work as well. Then I've also taken the intercultural developmental inventory. So this is an inventory where you kind of are, they give you like about 50 to 60 questions, and then gauge where you are on the intercultural developmental continuum. So right now I'm working at the last stage, which is the adaptation stage, and I'm working with an intercultural coach, and we're just kind of, I think 4 months into there's a lot of reflection that's involved, and I scored very highly on the inventory, even then, there's some things that I really need to work on, and then I'm looking at them and working on them. And before we continue, again, I'd just like to thank Women in Tech PK. I'd like to thank Faiza, Shamim, and Yumna for their awesome work on this. At any point, if you have any questions, you can go on and you can just put them in the chat box. And then Faiza will just kind of give them to me, and then we'll go on from there. And so this is our agenda. So today, really, what we are trying to do is to celebrate diversity. So that's a big goal, to celebrate diversity and help you celebrate diversity as well. This training was created keeping in mind the audience, and then the audience is like fresh graduates, people who are just kind of entering the profession, or people who are maybe are in the profession but want to know more about the topic because they genuinely do want to acknowledge and celebrate diversity. And this is what I was talking about, that I thought, instead of just listing what I wanted to do, why don't we ask ourselves these questions? Because as I said, creating this diverse and inclusive environment really means questioning a lot of things. And you have to start by questioning your beliefs, first of all. Like you will feel uncomfortable. You will feel like, okay, I need to question myself. But at the onset, it might seem something that's odd to you, or it might seem something that's no, we don't do this, right? But you have to understand that what is the cultural lens that you're using to view that particular group or that particular situation, and are you using your own cultural lens? And when I say cultural lens, I don't just mean the Pakistani cultural lens. I mean whatever lens you have in terms of society, in terms of traditions, customs, norms, in which you grew up. Are you judging people based on that lens? So culture in it, a presentation on culture is in itself a big thing that we could do at a later stage. I'm not going to bring in culture too much over here, because when I mean culture, I don't just mean food or clothes or other things. I mean a whole set of other things. I don't know if you are familiar with the iceberg analogy of culture. So when we look at that, or the fishbowl analogy, the house analogies, there's so many analogies that we can use to talk about culture. But right now, we're just going to focus on these particular topics that we have. And at the end, after we're done, I'm not going to start with the question, how will diversity and inclusion training help? I'm going to end with it, because you have to then from here on set goals for yourself as to how far do you want to go into this journey of being celebrating diversity and inclusion, especially in the workplace. So when we talk about diversities, it's not a buzzword. It's not a buzzword. I think it's something that we really need, and we really need to acknowledge. And a little bit of background with a lot of research done in the U.S. and Canada. This research shows that in even now, or in like I think in 5 years, the workplaces are going to be very diverse. They already are, but they're going to be even more diverse in terms of percentages. And then when you talk about diverse workplaces, then there are certain norms that companies follow that may not suit entire groups, or groups that come from different backgrounds, from different cultures. So when we talk about diversity, it's really the varieties of differences, and not just differences, but also of similarities, or the dimensions that people have. And these dimensions could be gender, race, ethnicity, tribal, indigenous origins, age, culture, generation, religion, class, caste, language, education, geography, nationality, disability, ability, I like to call it. I don't like to call it disability, but this is like the official definition that I have: sexual orientation, work style, and personality type. So, really, when you want to be truly diverse and you want to look at diversity as a whole, you really do need to look at all of these different dimensions. You cannot just pick and choose and say, oh, well, this dimension is at is contrary to my beliefs, so I'm conveniently going to exclude. Well, it's going to take you a while. It's a journey, as I said. It's going to take you, maybe some people are going to be very comfortable discussing everything, maybe some people are not going to be comfortable discussing everything, and then it's just a journey that we're all on, and it's the time that takes us to go on and do this. When we talk about inclusion, so we talked about the diversity, the various dimensions. not just differences but also the similarities, and based on the different dimensions that people have. Inclusion is leveraging that diversity to to create fair, equitable, and high performing organizations or community cultures. So when you are going to include people from diverse backgrounds or people from who are minorities, then, and I don't just in some context people think that, oh, okay, minority, is it just religion? Well, maybe in some societies it could just be religion. In some societies it could just be gender, right? In some societies it could be education or age. Or so minority is that group that is not represented as well as the dominant group is, right? It could be based on race. So as we said, it could be any of those groups that we talked about, and they're just, the numbers are small. So we need, why do we need to do this? Why do we need inclusion? Well, the first and foremost thing is that we need to be fair. Now, does that mean that we need to have equality? Well, mm, the thing is, we're moving towards equity and we're moving towards fairness. So that's the goal, to provide equitable solutions, to provide equitable environments. Now, what does equity mean? Equity means that it's not, equality is, you're giving some everybody the same shoe size. So there's the shoe analogy for to talk about equity and equality. You're giving everybody the same shoe size. For one person, the shoe is going to pinch, the other person is going to be big, and one person it fits. Equity is you provide shoes to everybody according to their shoe sizes, so that whatever fits them. And then there's this famous, there's this famous, I guess, a picture of three people, and then their boxes. So I think the main thing that we're talking about is moving towards that fairness point where you need to actually not have barriers, so that you don't need to even provide those boxes to people, and then it's just free for everybody. And remember one thing, that the goal of inclusion is that your groups, different groups, it could be minority, majority groups, these groups feel respected. Respect is a very big word when you talk about inclusion, and feel engaged. And I'm not talking about respect in terms of, there are some traditional concepts of respect where fear and authority is equal to respect. That is not the type of respect that we talk about. We are talking about respect where you genuinely, truly believe in the other person, and you believe that in the success of the other person. So that's what genuine success, genuine respect is. Okay. And then when you are going to provide these, so why are we doing this? So when you provide these inclusive environments, individuals are going to feel motivated, they're going to contribute, and that's really going to bring value to the society, that's going to bring value to your organization. So those are some of the things, very important, that don't just look at the differences, or don't just look at like, oh, okay, this is how we do things here. See how the other person's perspectives are different, and what is it that they have to bring in for you, for your company, and what is it that you have. So I think one of the first things that you can talk about is doing this self-reflection, and see how are you, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are some of the things that you bring into an organization or a community when you go over there. So our goal is, and now this, I've deliberately selected the title as is, because the ultimate goal is intercultural competence. Now, intercultural competence, there's a process that you can get to intercultural competence. There are people who are interculturally competent. That is when you remember at the beginning, I was telling you about that inventory that I took, and then there are stages. There are 5 stages in the intercultural competence model, and the goal is to be at the end stage, which is the integration or the adaptation stage, where you're very comfortable with your own culture, and you're very comfortable acknowledging your own differences and differences of other people, and you use those differences and similarities to bridge gaps, to bridge and make connections. So that's the main thing of being interculturally competent, that it's not like you are just going to be a melting pot, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, that you are aware of the differences, you are aware of your own cultural biases or your own cultural background, and then you use, and you're aware of others as well, their cultural biases, their cultural differences, and then you use those differences and similarities to bridge that gap that we have. And as I said, it's also written over here that you're using that knowledge to bridge that gap, And intercultural awareness is the ability to take in different perspectives belonging to different cultures. Now, sometimes, there's this, and being a fresh person to an organization, and I've actually experienced this. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Canada or the US, or the work environment. But there is some difference between US and Canadian work environment. As Canadians, we are thought to be passive aggressive, meaning to say that we're not just going to be directly telling the other person that this is not supposed to be done this way. We do it in a way that the other person doesn't feel that bad. And a very common phrase that a lot of us people who are involved with diversity and inclusion training are trying our best to kind of get people away from is the phrase "in Canada." So a lot of times, especially because I belong to teaching, and I forgot to mention that I taught an online course that was called Inclusive Teaching Practices. So that was specifically based on inclusive education, and how can institutions, how can teachers create inclusive environments for their students at colleges and universities. So in that course also, we kind of looked at that, and I could see there were like more than 30 participants of that course, and some of them were like, but if I don't tell my students that this is how we do things in Canada, how are they going to learn? So that was the one question that came about every time, and we looked at ways of answering that question and not saying in Canada this is what we do things, right? So when you try to impose on the other person that this is how we do things over here, this is the culture in this organization. So same thing at a lot of companies, you will notice that people will talk about, well, this is how it's done. We've always done it this way. This is another phrase that you get to hear a lot. We've always done it this way. Well, okay, I respect that you've always done it this way. I'm bringing in a different perspective. At least listen to that perspective. At least look at that perspective. And if there are some team leaders, supervisors, managers listening to this webinar, I think that's a very important thing. That at least be a good listener. Be a good listener and listen to the different perspectives that people have, because you don't know what they can do to really kind of make the company grow. And one thing that I've been very blessed, and with especially with my Canadian workplace, and in Canada, the culture is more of like this offering help, and really kind of supporting people and telling them that this is where you can go and this is what you can do. And a lot of people have done that for me, and I kind of want to do that for other people as well. I bring in different perspectives in my workplace. It's not unheard of, but it's very rare that you have a person of color who's an English language teacher, who's also a teacher trainer. And so a lot of times I'm asked a lot of questions that could make me feel uncomfortable, but never ever has anybody just kind of dismissed any of my ideas. They always look at them as, oh, you're bringing in a different perspective, we really appreciate that, we really admire that. And that's one of the ways, one of my managers actually told me that you've brought in these different perspectives, we would have never thought it this way. Now that kind of gives us more like um, innovative ways of moving forward. So to me that was something very natural, because maybe I was doing that, but then to somebody else from with a different mindset, it was new. And so that's why I think there was a lot of growth and that happened. So, a couple of other concepts that we may want to explore are culture and identity. So, these are some of the concepts that whenever you're going to be looking at, and I'm going to explore some of these concepts more in the next webinar when we have talk about equity and we talk about respect in the workplace. So, culture. So, what is culture? Culture is not just food, it's not just clothing, as I said. It's a shared, these are the shared norms or beliefs of a society or a group of people. So, culture does not have to be only geographically bound. Organizations have culture, different groups have culture, right? So different societies have different culture. So you when you become a part of that group, you start learning the culture that's there in that organization, in that group. And maybe you have a lot of questions. Other people are very comfortable with that culture, and they may think of things as being normal, but those shared beliefs that they have, maybe they're new to you. So just take some time to look at that culture, and not just the beliefs, but it's also the values and the assumptions that people have about different about themselves, or about their behaviors or their characteristics that they talk about. So that is really what is culture. It's learned, it's shared. So those are the main things about culture, that nobody's born, just knowing and understanding what that culture is. It's more like that you are going to learn that and share that. Okay, so I will answer that question in just a bit. So there are some models that I will share with you. There was a question that said, how do you deal with hostile people, hostile workplace where you speak differently or you are different? And I will share some personal, I will need to go a little bit, be personal about these things and share some of my experiences. Again, when we talk about identity, so identity is what you're made of. So identity is your unconscious sense of yourself. So what is your identity? So if we do an identity wheel a lot of times when we do this diversity training, and in that we look at ourselves and we say what are some aspects of our identity that we think are stronger, right? And this is our conscious self, and both as an individual and as a part of a larger society. And our identity of who we are influences with whom we affiliate and for whom we withdraw from. So we maybe, when we say we will meet and we click with somebody, so maybe they're like-minded. Why? Because they share some of those identity features that we have, right? And our identity also kind of influences how we see people, we see the world, and how we do things. And our identity also influences the extent to which we want to engage with people who are different from us. So I think, as I talked about reflection, this is a question that you may want to ask yourself. When was the last time you met somebody who was different? Or you consciously made an effort of knowing somebody who was different? Sometimes, even as a society, we're told that, okay, you know what, you need to stay away from that particular group, or you need to stay away from those particular people because they would be bad influence. Now, why would they be bad influence? Just because they dress differently, because they look differently, or have a different religion, or have a different, are from a different ethnic background, or speak a different language? Well, it's because of we feel threatened, because the identity is different. So these are some deep concepts that we have to talk about. We don't have a lot of time today. I just really want to move on to creating those inclusive environments that we have. So let's move to the next point. All right. So you will notice that there are these two pictures. I don't have a lot of words over here because I want to talk about cultural integration versus cultural assimilation, and that's what we've been seeing here in the U.S., in Canada, and across the world. With these shifting perspectives. So assimilation is when you really want the minority group to be and do and speak everything as the dominant group. So that's kind of the cultural assimilation that we're talking about. And then you must have heard of the analogies of the melting pots, that, oh, melting pot, it's a global village and this and that. Now those are concepts that are multicultural. Those are concepts that are good, but those concepts actually require the minority group to take on the color of the dominant group, to change themselves according to the wishes and desires of the dominant group. Now we're shifting towards cultural integration, so that should be the goal. From multiculturalism, we want to move to interculturalism. And a good analogy of that we use here in the US, in Canada, is that of a quilt. So just like you have a quilt, a patchwork quilt that's made up of so many different pieces of cloth. Now, each piece retains its individuality, but when you look at it together as a pattern of the fabric, then it has a role to play. It has a pattern to create. It's creating its own mark. It's not just one color that everybody's blended into, and it's just a neutral color or a melting pot. So the analogy that we use now is of the quilt or a mosaic, and that's what I used at the beginning. I did not have a picture of myself up when I was introducing myself, but it was a patchwork quilt that I had, because my identity, who I am is made up of all my experiences, knowledge, not just my culture of being a Pakistani woman, but of, working and living in Canada, working and living in the US. Um, Not just me, it's my, like, whatever shared values that I had, whatever values I learned, and how I'm kind of integrating into society. So that is why I thought that, the quilt represented me in a way that I could, I guess, explore myself or explain myself better in that sense. So, looking at cultural integration, so remember the analogy of the quilt, that if you remember to be like the quilt and to have your mark while retaining your individuality, or the difference that you have, I think that would be a great goal to have. And here I'd like to share my experience of when I first moved, and when I was kind of, going through this uh, acceptance, adaptation, integration phase. What was it that I was doing? So at some point, especially when I kind of faced a little bit of racism, a little bit of pushback from some people, I will not say a lot of people, just maybe, an off comment here and there, that, oh, but we're used to teaching English people from your country. How come you're a teacher and teaching English? And so something, things like that, right? So I mean, I would just at times I'd ask, I'd like, is there something wrong with the way I look? Is there something wrong with the way I do? And then there was this. I felt that I was in that danger of painting myself like everybody else and taking on the colors of the dominant group in terms of my dressing, in terms of everything that I did. And then that is the trap that a lot of people do fall into. That we think that if we disassociate ourselves with the things that are our identity, then those things, then we're going to be accepted by the dominant group, right? And that's where we try to take on that color. I'm fortunate for the training and the friendship that I had with people, that I was able to move from that mindset to a mindset of the patchwork quilt. What I felt that, whatever I may do, however I may change myself, I'm never going to be part of that dominant group. So I need to retain my individuality. I need to retain and celebrate the differences that I have, and then bring those differences and those perspectives in to the community, into the organization, and help out the organization look at things from a different perspective. And I think that's why, when we were moving towards decolonization of the curriculum and we're moving towards decolonization of institutional practices, it was very easy for me to understand and wrap my head around a collectivist mindset, um, rather than an individual mindset, because I kind of, came from the background of a collectivist mindset that many of us do have. So I think it's important to acknowledge that and not fall into that trap, that, okay, what do I need to do to really kind of fit in? So maybe I think if you want to fit in and be painted with the same paint, that's a personal choice. But I think if you be a little bit resilient and maintain your individuality, be proud of you. So the first step is from within. So sometimes when we are insecure from within, that's when we try and change ourselves. So be proud of who you are. Yes, be aware of your biases and of your own stereotypes and the assumptions that you carry with you as well. Drop those if those assumptions are mean that you need to be disrespectful or being hateful towards other groups. Then drop those, for sure. Drop those. You need to change, you need to evolve over time. But then, so these are some of the things that you really need to think about. And this is something very personal. We all have our own pace, that we some people are going to get there quickly, some people are going to take some time. Some people, you must have come across some people who look a certain way, but when you talk to them, they're so, like, they're so interculturally competent, they're so, like, out there, and you're blown away with whatever maturity that they display and the respect that they display. And that is because they've been through that process and they've understood that, they need to change themselves in ways that benefit other people and not just themselves. So is that all? Is that all that we need to talk about changing ourselves? Well, kind of, but really no. We have miles to go before we can say that we are interculturally competent, or we celebrate diversity, or we acknowledge, we're inclusive. Miles and miles to go before we do that. So what are some of the next steps? I think as starting steps, what we are going to do is we're going to focus on developing an intercultural awareness. And there are some simple steps, not so simple, because when you really I will challenge all of you to think about one stereotype that you have in your mind. Think about a bias that you hold. Think about a group, and I'm not talking about a cultural group. Think about a group. Yes, a cultural group, but from all the dimensions that I noted, that you have certain biases around. Has it ever happened that, based on how somebody looks, you've treated them differently, or based on what socioeconomic background they're from, you've treated them differently, or a religion, or even age? So a lot of times, especially with COVID happening and with everybody going online, how patient have you been with people who are not that computer savvy? How patient have you been in teaching other people, even around your house, how to deal with technology? Have you been frustrated by that? So these are some of the things. Do you have any biases? Any, have you ever said it, oh, you're not going to learn now because you're da da da, right? You're this age or whatever. So think about all of these things, and if you have, it's okay, because we've all had those. I've had those biases. And when we talk about bias, it's not just negative bias that you may have, it's also the positive bias that you may have, because where you may think that certain groups are better than you, that there are certain groups who have it more, who are out there, who really know it all. And those biases also impact the decisions that we make and we take. Sometimes we just kind of, taken aback by somebody's personality, and then or certain type of people, just because those people belong to a certain group. I'm sure they must be really good, right? This mindset is prevalent, especially when people belong to certain institutions. Oh, so and so graduated from there, oh yeah, they must be, like, it's okay. So check those biases that you may have, positive or negative, especially when you're hiring, when you're working with your team members. Then move from a difference avoiding mindset to a difference seeking mindset. So as we talked about in identity and culture, that the mindset is to avoid people who are different, not to talk to people, not to work with people who are different from us. You need to move away from that, and you need to move towards a difference seeking mindset. Here I'm going to share a personal example. There were certain, groups or certain, like, things that I was kind of uncomfortable at the beginning, and this is, I'm talking about, like, years and years ago, like 8 years ago, 10 years ago. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to challenge myself to work more with these groups, to work more with these people. And then when I started doing that, it was just, I mean, I viewed people as people, I viewed organizations as whatever they had to offer. And when I was able to take off that lens and look at them neutrally. So understand and acknowledge power differentials. This is also very important. And this brings in the concept of intersectionality, that probably we'll do it at the next webinar. And when you have power differentials, understand that anybody coming from a minority group is going to have it hard. And I think if you are somebody who's in a position to make sure that does not happen, or to maybe even soften that up, it's very important. It's very important. And remember the mindset of equality versus equity, and fairness. So I think we need to move away from that to equity mindedness and to fairness. That, okay, you know what, this person had a head start of so many years of education, this background, this knowledge, expertise, whatever, and this other person is equally competent, is creative, has wonderful ideas, but just because they're from this particular background, they do not have that head start. So how can I make it better for them? You're not favoring anybody, you're just providing equitable solutions. Acknowledge different perspectives. We've talked a lot about that. Learn to respect and leverage different perspectives and experiences. So this is a very important. Don't just dismiss somebody's opinion because they speak a certain language, or just because they come from a different area. Understand that if they are talking about something, I'm sure they have, they're talking, they have something in this schemata that they're basing their, current or future decisions on. And listen to them. Does it fit in with your organizational goals? Does it fit in with your values of your organization? And if you're working for an organization or an HR, does your, so first step, and we will talk about this again in the next session, does your workplace have values and missions that celebrate diversity? Is there a diversity statement? That a lot of institutions give diversity statements, a lot of courses have diversity statements. is your team giving a diversity statement? Are you telling your people that, it's okay to, I will celebrate your differences? And try and understand and know the people that you work with. Don't just dismiss them as workplace colleagues. Try and see if you know that, okay, what is their culture, what is their background. And I'm not saying being over friendly, like, we have to maintain the respectful professional workplace, as well. And then be aware, as I've already talked to you about, be aware of the negative and positive biases and assumptions and stereotypes that you have. So I'm just going to pause here and then read these few questions and then see if we can, if I've already answered these or I need to. So the first question is how to deal with a hostile work environment that doesn't like someone who looks different or speaks differently. What is the right way to deal with people who are different? Can we point that out while talking? What kind of questions can we ask? Okay. Number three is, do you think a diversity policy can help organizations? What should be in a policy like this? So I just kind of mentioned that yes, it's very important to have a diversity policy, diversity and inclusion policy at your workplace. And so the things that you need to look at is, you need to first of all acknowledge what are the groups that you celebrate as a company. And yeah, that's and then a question that came up was, how should we be self-aware about our biases? I think it's very difficult, and yes, it is difficult. That is why the next thing that I'm going to give you is a tool. And the last bit of this presentation is a tool. I'm going to introduce you to two tools that you can use at your organization to really kind of, check your biases. So talking about diversity acknowledgement and statements, yes, you need to have those. And it could be something as simple as, like, everybody's welcome. When you say everybody, it's a good idea to um, mention the groups, because again, we talked about not blanketing everybody with the same words or paint. So mentioning the groups, mentioning by name what the different groups are, so that people feel welcomed when they look at your mission or your diversity statement. Like, okay, I belong to this particular, overall general. When you talk about race, ethnicity, they do know that I'm welcomed in this particular place. And then as a manager, as an HR person, as a team leader, it's your responsibility to make sure that everybody is included. That means just kind of, getting some time to know, just generally kind of icebreakers that you can have with them. And then avoid questions that show your hidden or implicit bias. So we have, implicit biases that we have. So implicit bias could be like, over here in the US, and in Canada, a very common question that instantly kind of tells us about that is, a lot of people are very curious as to where you're from, right? And so that is the question that they will ask, like, where are you from, right? So the first question is, where are you from? And so if I tell them I'm from Canada, they're like, no, 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 I mean, where are you originally from, right? And then you'd kind of, if you just say Pakistan, then they're satisfied. But if you just kind of, tell them about, and this is a point that a lot of people, the younger generation especially, comes across this question, because, well, they've been born and brought up over here, but somebody like me, I'm very comfortable stating where I'm from. And then the next question would be like, oh, but I've heard people in your country don't have this thing. And then, where did you have your education? Were you educated here? What? So there are like sets of questions that people will ask. So that is one way that a lot of people will ask. I think listening, be an active listener. So be an active listener. That is the first thing that you can do when you're meeting somebody, when you're working on a team. And and then don't judge. That's the other big piece. So yes, you have your biases. Yes, you may have your assumptions or your stereotypes. Do not judge people when you're working with them or interacting with them. Keep your assumptions, check your assumptions yourself. And even if you have blurted out a comment, I don't want to make comments. I know, as individuals, that I have been part of that we have these stereotypes in our mind that, oh, somebody belonging to this particular group is going to be like this. We have name calling is there. We make fun of languages. We make fun of accents, right? So we make fun of a lot of all of these things. Are you doing that unconsciously? If you're doing that unconsciously, the first thing is that you need to stop. when I was going through this phase of intercultural communication, there was a time that actually I just went very quiet. I would not say anything. I would not speak. It does not mean that I was a person who was making all of those negative comments. No, but I think my mind just kind of went into this introspection mode where I was analyzing everything, and then I was just kind of like, okay, you know what, I need to be very careful. And then after I was out of that phase, now I'm at that phase where I'm able to, own up to the mistakes that I've made, own up to the things, and say that, yeah, I not too long ago I was like that, but now I understand why somebody's saying whatever they need to. So when you are actively listening, that means that you are not looking at people or listening to them through your lens. You're looking at them neutrally so that you understand what they're trying to say and understand what they have to say. So this is a tool that you can use to reflect and check your biases. I've used it. I've used this tool. A lot of companies use this tool. There are a lot of other tools. One tool that is the die, and I can definitely share that a little bit with you today, and then at the next uh, webinar I can bring that in. So this tool is called the RISE tool. It's an intercultural tool that will help you faster intercultural communication. So first of all, the first step is recognizing your own biases and limitations. So some of us are not that far off in the growth, or the journey. We need time. So recognize your bias and recognize that you need time. So I'm sure there are many, many, many concepts. There are many, many, many ideas, ideals, worldviews that clash with your existing worldviews, right? So how ready are you to accept a different worldview? When we talk about a different cultural group, oftentimes it's also a different worldview that they bring in, right? And when I say worldview, I don't just mean religion or culture. I mean everything, the way that person grew up to be. And so, how ready are you to accept somebody else's worldview? And are there some worldviews or are there some cultures or groups that you are not comfortable accepting as yet? So, I think acknowledging that is the first step. That at least you are aware that, okay, you know what, as a person, as Nadia, these are my biases, these are the groups or worldviews that I'm not comfortable with. I know they exist. I know they're different from me. I just need to work on accepting. When you accept, or when you look at somebody else's worldview, it's not that you are saying that they're right and you're wrong. It's just acknowledging that they have a different worldview and they're entitled to live with that different worldview, right? So identify the next step is after you recognize, you identify other possible explanations based on your cultural understanding of others. So this is you can ask some questions that you have for yourself. So for recognizing, you will ask, what is standing in the way of me understanding the situation? Am I seeking first to understand rather than imposing my own assumptions? So when you're recognizing as especially as a team leader, as especially as somebody who works in an organization, are there any assumptions that you are imposing on other people? First of all, check that out. Next, identify other possible explanations, and you can ask yourself a question: what else could be at play? So if somebody has been rude to you, something happened at work, maybe it's a different worldview, maybe it's a different mindset, right? Have you looked at all of the dimensions? If there was a communication gap, or if there was an incident that happened, were there other possible explanations? Was it that this person, just because you think, oh, you know what, people from this racial group are always like this, or people from this religious group are always like this? Before you say that, first of all, don't say that. Second of all, before you do that, think about it. Is it just race, or could it be something else that's at play, that's happening? It could be something personal that's happening in that person's life. Then seek common ground, bridge your differences. So especially when you're working on a team, what are some of the things that you need to know? So what do you need to know to seek common ground? So that's something very important that you should know. And the last point is evolve your practice. How can I use what I have learned to change the way I approach a similar situation in the future? So there was a question around here about communication. So if you use this RISE tool to effectively bridge that communication, so first of all, recognize and check your biases, limitations, and assumptions. Are you imposing them on the other person, or is it that the other person's belief, or whatever they've said, or the communication that you've had with them, you think it's not worthy because it does not fit in your cultural lens. And then identify the other and acknowledge the other explanations, and then bridge those differences. Try and understand why the other person did or has said whatever they did say. And then for future reference, evolve your practice and ask yourself these questions. Okay, what do I need to do so that in the future this does not happen? How can I make it better for the other person? um, the other the other model that I want to show all of you is, I don't know if it's that clear or not, but I can just that's why I listed this over here. This is a four layers of diversity model that you can actually use. And the reason why we have this, so there are four dimensions to it. So there are four possible layers of diversity that you can actually see in the workplace, especially. So first of all is your personality. So this is at the center. So why is personality at the center of this model? It's because this refers to an individual's characteristics, their personality style, and how this person presents with respect to personality. Are they an introvert? Are they an extrovert? Is this person a doer? Is this person a thinker? And so the type of personality that a person brings is going to impact how they will advance through an organization, right? So what are some of the roles that they may have if somebody's an introvert versus an extrovert? What are some of the roles that they're good at? So understanding that is important. The next dimension is the internal dimensions. So these are six aspects, and we generally have we don't have any control over it. We have little control over these internal dimensions. And these six internal dimensions are gender, age, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, and physical ability. And we don't have a lot of choice over these. And then they influence our role in our personal lives and in our professional lives as well. So these internal dimensions that we have. Then the next layer of diversity that we can look at is the external dimension. And this layer contains aspects which are a result of experiences that we have had in life. So this external dimension the part where so is the part where your life plays a role, how you grew up, in what circumstances you grew up. So those are some of the things, the choices you made in life. Those are some of the things that lead to these external dimensions. Some of them are education, marital status, religion, work experience, some aspects of these. And they actually impact how employees are going to connect and be valued, and how they're seen and how they're used. So all of these are also there, but then these choices we do have control over, these external dimensions that we have. The last one is the organizational dimension. So, this outer layer of the model talks about or is comprised of aspects of similarities and differences that are a part of work in an organization. So, this could be work location, it could be seniority, it could be union affiliation, right? And all of these dimensions impact the treatment of employees and the productivity of the organization. So when we talk about these different models, these different layers, why do we look at them? So the first thing is that we are looking at all of these dimensions because these dimensions are representative of areas in which there can be similarities as well as differences. So the similarities are good. It's good to identify the similarities so that we have a foundation. So the similarities that we have within an organization provide and foster common ground and provide a foundation. And then it's also important to look at the differences. So if you are able to recognize the differences, and then if these differences are positioned as an advantage, they will provide a lot of opportunity for growth to the company, to the organization, because when you recognize new perspectives and when you recognize new ideas, viewpoints, directions, different people will bring in. It's not the same culture in the organization that's going to happen. So when we look at these four layers, it's very important to acknowledge so that there are these four layers that we have in an organization. If you look at people that we work with, and then the other thing is that this model kind of gives us an idea of what are some of the things that within our organization are similar, and what are some of the differences that are there. And then if everything's very similar, then maybe you need to have more, I don't know, diversity, or maybe not. It's fine. And then the other thing is that, but the important thing is not to single out the differences, not to single out the different perspectives, but to build on them. So if you are in a position where you can actually use those different perspectives and use those new ideas, don't just rule them out that, oh my god, this person is very new, they don't know, they don't have, yeah, I've been in the field for so many years, I know better. Yes, you do know better, but at least listen to that other person that you have. Okay. So I'm going to stop here now because I think we're almost at time. So if there are any questions, I hope I've been able to answer some of the questions. So we did have these three questions: how to deal with a hostile work environment that doesn't like someone who looks differently or speaks differently. Now that is, I would say, the organization needs to, there needs to be an overhaul of the organization. If the work environment is so hostile that they don't like to work with somebody who looks different or speaks differently, sometimes what happens is that you have to first analyze. So you have to first analyze, and you have to see if this difference is at the organizational level, or if this difference is at the level of the workers. So for this particular situation, how to analyze this, you could use uh, a tool that's called die. So I'm just going to put it in the chat box. It's called and I can talk about this more. I don't have it on my slides. So this is die. D stands for describe. Describe is what I see. So when something like this happens, so if you're in a situation when you feel that you've been negatively impacted, or you feel that there was a communication breakdown just because the other person said something and it did not conform, so what are some of the things that you could do? So first of all is die, is D for description. So describe what I see, only describe the observed facts, not about what you thought might have happened, just whatever you observed and the facts that you observed, just first of all describe those. Then I stands for interpretation. This is, what is your interpretation of the incident that happened? What I think about what I see. So if you're talking about hostile environment, if you're talking about a hostile company, is it just your perspective, or is it that you've seen it in other people as well? Is it just what you think you've seen? And then the next one is evaluation, how I feel about what I see, positive or negative. So when you come across something, then evaluate that, and then you should be able to see how you feel. So this model, or this tool is very good, especially if there are some critical incidences that happen at work. So a critical incident could be that there was communication breakdown. Maybe you said something and somebody misinterpreted, or somebody said something to you. So if you analyze the situation using these three simple letters: describe, interpret, and evaluate, you will be able to see if you were the one who was at, how much of a fault was it of yours. So just for example, especially if you are a manager or supervisor, it once happened to me. And at that point, I felt that, oh my God, why is this person after me? Like, why are they getting after me? But now, years on, when I look at it, and I look back and I see, and I use the die tool to evaluate the situation, I was able to describe and see that from the perspective of the other person as well, that it was the incident that happened with me had to do something with a promotion, and I was promoted over somebody else. And so, I mean, I, well, thought, did not think about this, but then I had to take in the years of experience of that other person and how that they might have felt. So afterwards, after using this tool die, which is description, interpretation, and evaluation, I was able to see how I could have reacted differently, or what I could have done to make things better for that particular person. The next, I've already answered question number three. Do you think a diversity policy can help? For sure. If your organization does not have a diversity policy, when I apply for jobs, that's the first thing that I look at. I don't want to work at a company that does not celebrate me, that does not have me or value, it does not value me. So it's very important. Sometimes we work at organizations just for the culture of it, because they're so diverse and they celebrate diversity and they're so inclusive. And the next question was, what is the right way to deal with people who are different? So you can use the RISE tool, you can use this die tool that we have, that if somebody's different, check your bias first, check your assumptions or stereotypes first. That's something very important. Can we point that out while talking? So I don't really kind of understand what you mean over there. Can you point out cultural differences while you're talking? Probably not. If I mean, if you see somebody with different hair, with a different hair type, or something else, it depends on what you want to point out. But sometimes people can be offended by things that you ask them. So first, know that person. If you're in that position, I have a friend, a colleague, who actually did this entire presentation on hair types, and especially of hair types of African American and Black communities. And then so there was hair type A, hair type B, hair type C, and then she it was such a fascinating presentation where she said, just as like a simple comment like, oh, why is your hair like this, or what or people want to touch your hair, that can be so offensive, to certain groups. So you really need to understand what is it that you want to talk about, and then why do you want to point out the difference. That's what we're trying to that's where we're trying to go, that we're trying to acknowledge the differences, but we're also trying to bridge the gap and be, move towards similarity. And what kind of questions we can ask. So if you're genuinely interested in somebody, you could have some icebreaker activities, and just don't put the person on the spot. And one thing that you have to be very careful of and mindful of, and this is a very important point, I should have mentioned it before, is that one person is not a representative of their own culture. So if I say that I belong to the Pakistani community, me as one person cannot represent. So when you are meeting somebody from another culture, don't assume that, oh, just because this person's from this culture, that is why, everybody in their culture is like that. No. You have to understand, you have to see that one person cannot, and I think as teachers, we have to be very mindful of this thing, because as I said, I've taught students from over 100 countries, and students from a country, like, term one could be different and term two could be very different. So we have to understand that, yes, there's some similarities, some things that are general, but remember that you cannot take one person as a representative of their entire culture, because we're all different within our cultures as well. All right, so are there any other questions?
Yeah, so there is another question, that how to initiate a conversation around diversity in an organization where they are always talking about a cultural fit.
So I didn't catch the last bit of the question.
How to initiate a conversation around diversity in an organization where they are always talking about a cultural fit.
A cultural fit. Okay. Yeah. So I think the best way to kind of do that would be, because here now you as an individual are trying to change the entire organization. So I think I would first of all check in with HR, if there is an HR, or what the policy is. Is there a diversity policy? Is there a diversity inclusion policy there or not? But as I understand from the question, the culture of the whole organization is that you need to be a certain type, you need to belong to a certain type of a cultural group, in order to fit in, right? Now I think in that situation, if I were in that particular situation, and I have been, I guess it also depends on, is somebody asking you point blank that you need to belong to this certain type of culture, otherwise you cannot exist here. So that's the first thing that I would ask. And then the other thing is, how willing are you to change? So when I first gave my example of trying to fit in, right? So how willing are you, and what is it about yourself that you're willing to change? So there are some aspects of ourselves that we may change to, just to kind of fit in or to accommodate, just because that suits us, because we're comfortable doing those. But then there are others that we are not. So then I think that also kind of takes you to that important and critical decision making of, do you want to continue working with this particular organization, and if yes, then what are some of the ways that you can bring about the changes? So one of some of the ways that you can bring about those changes could be, maybe it depends on what your role is. So if your role is somebody who you could do it through informal discussions, you could do it at team meetings, you could have something like, at every team meeting, is there something new that somebody would like to present, a new idea or talk about? So I've chaired a lot of academic council meetings, academic senate meetings. I was vice chair, so I've been on academic council for about 4 years. It's a lot about, talking about policy making, new policies, things like that. But at every meeting, we decided that, what, we do need to have a new topic that's related to whatever we're doing, but then just gives us a different perspective. And I think bringing in those new presentation topics or ideas, and then just like 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes topics, really changed the way we viewed our own organization. There was things about my own organization I didn't know, or I had thought I'd known, but they were not the way that, they were portrayed. So I think having something like that could be different. And then I think having this open conversation with whoever so is in charge of that, and getting their feedback on what is like, what is their idea about it. So if the owner of the company is somebody like that, um it depends. Like I can understand where the question is coming from. There's a lot of startups, there's a lot of businesses that don't want to change the culture, but I think it's, you have to kind of make them understand that if they don't, then they're not going to be, going around about with the times, right? And then sometimes you can bring in the change, just like that, and other times, but this particular type of change will take time. You have to understand that this is not an overnight thing that will happen. You need to first of all have that tolerance, and you need to have that patience, first of all. So that's the thing. The other thing that I could talk about, if it's an individual owner, would be to kind of talk, maybe make a presentation myself around why is it important that our company celebrates diversity. And I actually have been in a situation like this with some of my colleagues, especially when we were doing the sensitive topic of indigenizing the ELL curriculum. Now in Canada, Indigenous communities have been there, and they've been kind of, neglected. And so there was this whole thing that the government took the initiative, but at the organizational level, or even at the personal, like meeting, like group level, the initiative was not there. So then the organization started taking the initiative a little bit, but at the group level there were a lot of people who were actually resistant. They were like, but how can we teach this? This is not us. Especially when there were topics around assimilation, and how the indigenous communities were forced to converge to a particular religion and forced to change their way of life. There was a lot of pushback from a lot of my colleagues, and I had to listen to some really harsh words from people. It was easy for me because they said, "Well, you have bring in an outside perspective," but I would always tell them, and they were able to change after that. That don't think that you have the burden to change everything. Just, I think you need to do your own duty, and you need to recognize your own biases, and then you need to see why do we need. So I think you need to talk to them as to why do we need to bring in this change? Why is it important? Um, the next question is, what if top management asks to bring change? So, what's the most important first step towards that cultural change? I think, first of all, the first step would be to create your own inclusive policy. I think that's the first thing that and make sure that it aligns with your values and your mission statement. So we're talking about core changes to an organization, to some management. That's the first thing that you need to sit down. It's very easy to kind of talk about, oh, we need to be diverse, we need to be inclusive, but really this is a journey. Just like you just like when people first started driving cars, yeah, cars could be available, but you had to teach people had to learn how to drive a car. Same way with something like this. You can give them the you can bring in the policy, you can bring in the roads and everything, but unless and until you train your employees and tell them how to undertake this journey. So that is why training is something that's very important. So that and remember, intercultural communication, and being intercultural, this is a skill. So like any other skill, this can be learned. I did, yes, there are some people who are more mindful, they're more inclusive naturally, but why was that? Why did that happen? That was because of maybe their background, but that was maybe because how they grew up or the environment that they were in. So you have to understand that this is a skill, and some people will take it longer, just like driving, just like learning the computer, just like any other thing. Some people will take longer, and some people will learn it quicker. Depends on where everybody is in their journey on being inclusive, in their journey of being of trying to let go of, like, some of the thing. I should not use the word let go. So trying to look at different perspectives. Nobody's asking you to let go of anything. What I think everybody's asking is to recognize and acknowledge that there are different perspectives, and there will be different perspectives, and we cannot paint everybody with the same paint. The next question is, and I understand that changes take time, but how do you measure it and tell about tentative time? So, okay, so this is a very good question, that it takes time. Now, so you could do something like a a pre and a post survey kind of a thing about certain. So we did this. I did this when I was teaching the inclusive teaching practices course. It was a 1 month long course. There was a lot that the participants had to unpack. They had to question themselves. There were so many things that people did not even realize that they were doing, and they were just and I'm glad that they acknowledged that they were doing all of these things, and then they said, we're going to be mindful and not do this as well. So what we did was that there was a pre-course survey, about how people felt in different situations. So there was about 10, 15 questions. People filled those out. Then we had a mid kind of, at the end of the course survey. So after 4 weeks, there was this post course survey. Now, as I was teaching that course, and my manager and myself, we realized that for this particular course, 4 weeks is a very short time. We need to, because as we said, this is this reflective inquiry process that takes time. So what we did was that we sent participants another survey after 6 weeks of finishing up of the course. So you have to create this timeline. And this other competencies course that I was taking, um, it took me over a year to take this particular course and this training, because I was taking two courses at a time. It's not about it. So you have to understand that it has to be intentional. If you are just checking off boxes, then maybe it's going to take you longer. So if it has to be intentional. That's the difficult part. But the other thing is that, so what our company has done, or what different companies do, is that they offer these training sessions, and then what they do is that they employees have to take the training. They have to fill out those surveys and other things to gauge how those things are. I think it's very important that you share with your employees that wherever they are on their journey is between them and maybe the training instructor, whoever. So nobody's going to the organization does not need to know where they are at. If you've had that training, what are some of the things that you've taken away? So I think the trainings that are structured for these are where the questions and other things really kind of help people to think about critical incidents, think about things that they've done in the past, and then look at that. So I'd say, like, one training is not going to solve it all. Um, After that training, so for example, after this webinar, probably, I mean, like, our audience is so diverse, But probably what we could do is that, have some kind of a survey where your answers are anonymous, where you really really kind of reflect and think about. So I think as homework, being the teacher that I am, a homework that I'd like to give all of you is list down at least three stereotypes that you have. So think about it. You don't have to share it with anybody, but be honest to yourself. Three stereotypes that you've created around different communities, different cultures, different groups, and then one negative bias and one positive bias that you have. So if you think that anybody who is from England or America is better than everybody else, so probably that's a positive bias that you have, right? And one negative bias, so it could be around different, again, age groups, culture groups. So this is your homework. I'm not going to give you a lot. First of all, acknowledge three of your stereotypes. If you don't have three, awesome, you're already, far ahead than of others. One negative bias that you have and one positive bias that you have. About it could be about any different group. So that's the first step that you need to take, and then you need to start. I'm just going to go down and just put my um, laptop on charging. Okay, so that's the first step that you can do. All right. And then after you're done with that, then you need to think about, after this training, do you want to learn more about it? So when I first started taking this training, I felt that I was very confused. I was like, but there's so many things that I'm doing, but then so many things that I'm not doing. Where do I start? So first, start by asking those tough questions, and then make an effort. So the other piece of that is that if there's somebody around you who fits that stereotype or that bias that you have about them, go up to them, try and be open and listen to them. You don't have to ask them any questions, like, because that could seem really intrusive as well. So just try and be open with them. If maybe they speak another language, maybe they look differently, and just genuinely take an interest in the type of person. It does not have to be going up to them. It could be at team meetings, just kind of, positively contributing to whatever point that they have to make, and then just try and listen to them as well. Just because they are different doesn't mean that they have all bad things to say. Yeah. All right.
Great. Thank you so much, Nadia. I can see a few more questions, but
Uh-huh.
most of them are around the discussion that you already had. And I
Okay.
feel that you have already answered those questions.
Okay.
So I think that's about it. Thank you so much. And let's do another one next week.
Yeah, so I mean, folks, next week our training is on equity and respect in the workplace. So that's where most of your workplace related questions are going to be answered. So I did introduce you to these three tools. You can look them up. These are there in any intercultural training that you have. So the RISE tool, the four layers of diversity, and the DIE tool that I talked about. And then I can bring in these tools next time as well and elaborate on them. If you have any questions that you'd want me to, I'm kind of working on next week's presentation as well. But if you have any really kind of, burning questions that you really need to know the answers, or if you need some resources, just let me know. And then what I can do is at the end, I could make that part of the webinar, and then that way, your answers, I will be able to answer your questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Nadia. Have a good day.
Yeah, thank you so
And
much,
good.
Faiza, for this opportunity. And thank you, everybody, for listening. You've been great. I hope you were listening to me without judging me. So that's a part that I'm just going to let you go with. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.